Welcome to the Psych and Business Podcast, where we highlight the integration of psychology and psychological principles into the world of business and organizations. I'm your host, Dr. Ernest Wayde. I am thrilled to introduce my guest today. Her name is Dr. Marie-Hélène Pelletier, better known to her colleagues as MH. She's a psychologist with a systems mind and has both a PhD and an MBA. She has over 20 years of experience as a practicing psychologist and as a senior leader in the corporate, insurance, governance, and healthcare sectors. Dr. Pelletier is also an author releasing her new book, The Resilience Plan, a strategic approach to optimizing your work performance and mental health. And I hope we can get her to talk a little bit about the book today. MH, welcome to the show.
Ernest, it is an absolute pleasure to be here with you.
I'm so glad to have you on the show, MH, and especially because I was reading your bio and you have such a very interesting and unique experience, being a psychologist and bringing that experience to all of these sectors, including healthcare. And as a bilingual psychologist, please tell us a little bit about your journey. I'd love to hear how you got into this work and how you ended up where you are.
Yes. Well, so originally I'm from Quebec City on the East Coast in Canada, where in that province mostly speaks French. So my first language is French. And then I had the chance to work in northern Quebec, so northern regions there, seeing how people lived in a much smaller town, remote, no access to services, because that's now 20 years ago. So internet was not what it is now. And so that basically led to me being interested in doing research in this area. So I moved to the west coast of Canada, ended up doing research at the time in telehealth, which now is very obvious. Everyone's doing it. At the time, it was considered pre-embryonic. No one understood it. I often got the comment of, "Oh, your work is ambitious," which I thought was a compliment. It was not, as you and I know. It was not. And but point with this is that as I did this research at the time, it required a lot of funding because I could not use the internet. It was not fast enough. I had to use 6 telephone lines to transmit telephone and video data. It was like, and I had to manage a number of people as well. And
That's
so
really
with
old
all
school.
this, yes, and so that generated my interest in management. That's how I then decided to do an MBA, but part time, because I wanted to also do the work and see if I actually liked it, and I did. And then through various experiences, I ended up working in employee and family assistance programs in insurance industry, in healthcare, and then now for the last few years having my own business where I do speaking, executive coaching, and still have a small practice as a psychologist.
Yeah, I love your experience, and it reminds me of some of mine because I have a master's in information systems, which is like the MBA for the technology field and also the psychology aspect. So I love the variety of experiences that you've had and the management experience that you have. Tell us, how did that help you form your own leadership and your own management style?
Exactly, because there is something uniquely challenging about bringing interdisciplinary training to
Hmm.
our combined background. So you did that, I did that too. For me, what led to a very useful place, and one that I love, is that I understand, of course, the whole psychology side of things, the
Hmm.
research, the practice, the implementations, but having been trained and having been myself on the line of fire as
Hmm.
a leader of all levels, the junior leader of a call center struggling to deal with the fire every minute of every day, to middle manager trying to figure out how to work with everyone below me and above me, and then
Uh-huh.
and the higher up positions and all this, and then in governance even positions, these kinds of things. So what it did is that a few people said this, that I almost worked like a translator, where I was able to bring the psychology information in a language that connected with people on the business side. And now that I've had a few more years of experience doing this, I can even be more specific. So sometimes I work with people in the tech sector, sometimes they're project managers, sometimes they are physicians. It varies, and I can usually bring the perspective in words that resonate for them.
I love the description that you have there. The interconnector. I think of it as a bridge, right? You're able to
Yeah.
bridge the work that people do and the ability ability to actually get those people to do that work, right? Because I think as psychologists, we're experts in human behavior, and organizations have to deal with human behavior all the time. And so this is where you and I have that advantage of being experts in human behavior. And I know you are an expert in resilience. Talk to us about how you developed that expertise and how that inspired you to write this book.
Yes. In early in my career, because I worked in employee and family assistance programs, that was
Hmm.
fascinating because that was an entry door that many people used to see a psychologist that otherwise they would never have taken all the steps to find a psychologist and speak
Right.
to one. And so it meant that more often they were seeing me in a proactive way, not as far down the road as sometimes we would. And so I saw the benefits of being proactive. Loved that. Loved how we could save so much time and pain, really, if we were
Hmm.
able to tackle things early on.
Hmm.
So saw the immense benefits of being proactive. Then move forward, add all of these experiences and training for me. What this led to is that people who sought me out tended themselves to be professionals and leaders because they liked that combination of background.
Hmm.
So I do all this work with them. And then very often I would have someone come in and say something like, okay, MH, I've gone through a lot of very high level demands in my career. I've met all of these demands, no problem. Why am I not now able to keep doing this?
Mm.
Seriously, like, what's my problem? I know how to do this. And then, of course, I do a bit of the psychology answer. Well, context changes, and it would still be like, ugh, not liking the response. So then I moved to the analogy on the business side. And I said, okay, if we were to launch a new product or a new service here as a business, would we just have a great idea and launch it?
Hmm.
Or would we have a great idea and then look at the context? Who else is offering this? How much are they charging for it? Who's
Hmm.
buying it? What trends in the future may impact it? All
Yeah.
these.
Do
Of
your
course,
research.
yeah, we would look at the context, right? All the forces impacting the overall direction that we want to take. So I said, same thing here. We need to look at your context. And that then shifted people's perspectives, made sense, achievable, doable, get it, all good. And then that's it. What over time with people saying after having done this work, saying, "I wish I knew this earlier,
Hmm.
so I could have saved myself a bit of time or pain or even burnout in some cases." That then I thought, okay, okay, okay. If I can find the time, but collect this in a book, then yeah, it could get in people's hands earlier in their career, hopefully, like in university libraries and bookstores, but also for leaders throughout our path of leadership,
Hmm.
so that we can find ways to optimize it.
I love that example that you've given, because to me it really resonates when we talk about resilience, and people think resilience is endless, right? It's just you can be resilient until the end of the world. But the truth is that's not the reality, right? As you're saying, is as you are exploring the context, there are limits, and this is what I'm hearing you say, is there are limits, and you have to be aware of them. So talk to us about the resilience plan, and how that feeds into that.
Yes. Yes. I so much agree with what you just said. And I think, especially people who see themselves and are
Hmm.
very resourceful, capable, high performers, that kind of thing. You get to a point where you think that this is part of who you are.
Hmm.
And that, to your point, that your resilience has no limit, really. It's part of who you are. It's your personality. So, of course,
Yeah.
there's no limit. It's not. It's not a personality trait. And so it is, therefore, the good news with this is you have, well, the important news is you have to work on it, but the good news
Yeah.
is you can influence it, right? And so, sorry, I lost track of your question.
Yeah, no, I think what you're talking about here is that resilient really isn't a trait. It's not a personality trait.
Yeah.
It's a state that you can come in and out of. And as a leader, a lot of the times we think, I am a resilient leader and I'm always going to be a resilient leader. And so when you're faced with some challenge that your resilience fails, you begin to wonder, what kind of a leader am I? So I'm wondering about the resilience plan. How does the resilience plan help leaders better understand that?
Yes, yes. Well, it generates a reflection. I even have questions at the end of the chapters for your own reflection or book club if you want or
Hmm.
whatever. But it sort of I'm sharing the reflection that many people I've worked with have had over times, the words they're using, the realizations they're making through the various chapters. So initially, it is about, in part, realizing that how yes, we've thought of ourselves this way.
Hmm.
It's true. We are, yes, we're optimistic, we're highly capable, all these things. And we need to feed our resilience. So, first, it's
Hmm.
shifting to the realization that, I do need to um, optimize it, nourish that resilience. And because if not, there will be unfortunate consequences. So, being clear on this. Then the book brings us through, okay, so how? Because
Yeah.
we and it's not how in terms of information we all already have thanks to
Hmm.
the pandemic and to general information about ways to increase our resilience. We know the problem is implementing them in a life that's already overflowing, in a
Yeah.
schedule that does not have 20 minutes to do something else. And so the way to do this is to customize this plan. So in the book, I propose various steps or exercises, lens to apply to this reflection, and we can talk in more detail about what these are, to
Hmm.
create a strategic plan for us as individuals.
Mm.
And that's what makes a difference. So the book is saying, yeah, okay, resilience, good for all of us. In theory, in our head, yes, we agree, sure.
Yeah.
In practice, how does your last week look like? Not so much. So therefore, let's find ways, because not paying attention to it, not investing in it, will not be sustainable. So,
Hmm.
but then no one can carve 2 hours a day. So therefore, if we customize it, make it a real plan that's personalized to you and your life and your current context, then you can move forward with a good plan.
Hmm. Yeah, I love what you're saying here. I think one of the things that's really resonating with me is that resilience is something that you have to work on.
Yeah.
I talked about this in one of my individual episodes. How resilience is something that's personal. It's a lifelong developmental journey, and I love the word that you use, nourish. You have to keep nourishing it. You have to keep feeding it. In order to develop it, and everybody does that differently. And it sounds like your book really helps each individual figure out how to do that in this really crazy world where time is limited. I always want to start with one of those things that I learned early on is the why. Talk to us about the why it's important to develop this plan, to continue to be as a leader, to develop your resilience.
Yes. The reality, especially as a leader, it's true in other contexts as well. And specifically as a leader, we're going to face additional, larger, unexpected demands all day, every
Hmm.
day. And so the demands are increasing here. And that's in part what I talk about in the book, that we want to keep an eye on both the supply and demand, not to bring them exactly the same level, blah, blah, none of that, but
Hmm.
to really actually have good visibility on what your demands are and what your sources of supply are. Because if we don't, we're trending down. We will deplete, and that will
Hmm.
not be sustainable, because the amount of resource we have, our health, our energy, our focus, our ability to make decisions, all this will drain down. That's
Yeah.
in part how people get in full depression, sometimes through a burnout, sometimes through different ways. And so we have to pay attention. And one of the key things, because again, I'll have leaders say, of course, I'm paying attention. Here's the piece. Often, part of what allows us to be that capable, that resourceful, that fearless in
Hmm.
at times is that we are optimistic in some ways, but at times we're also even minimizing the reality. So we're not listing actually all the demands. We're minimizing some of these demands. We're ignoring even some of them, thinking they don't even belong on the list, which
Hmm.
means we will have a very biased perspective on the demands we have on our plate until it catches up to us and we're like at 9.9 out of 10 full. And so, just like anything else, no matter what area you're a leader in, I'm
Hmm.
certain that you're spending a fair bit of time risk managing. You're
Yeah.
stepping back, you're looking at the full picture. We're doing this for our work and need to do it for our resilience. Otherwise, we're at risk.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely appreciate what you're saying there in terms of risk management and just being realistic, right? I
Yeah.
think sometimes people confuse grit with resilience, where grit is just that perseverance, that pushing through to success. Sometimes success is not possible. Sometimes you will fail. And this is where resilience really comes into play. And so being realistic about the situation and managing your risk, I think is one of those things that's really important with resilience. I'm understanding that correctly?
Yes, and I think it's a immensely important point for all of us to keep in mind, because some of how we react to situations and demands is influenced a bit by beliefs that are shared in society or around
Hmm.
us in the culture of our our profession or our industry. And sometimes some of those beliefs will include things like you have to never give up. You have to persist no matter what. And from a resilience perspective, as we're looking at our ability to go through adversity and come out even stronger and to sustain this over time, there will be times when letting go is the thing to do.
Yeah.
And and that's important to keep in mind that this is an option. And again, I'll use the business analogy. When we're over here in a business setting, at launching some products, launching some services, there will be times where we will invest a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of everything, years at times,
Hmm.
to launch something, and we'll at some point have to make the decision to drop it, let it go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the healthiest thing that this organization at that moment has to do. Do they wish they didn't invest all this time? Yes, but by now we're here. And sometimes the best thing to do is to drop it. And so, same logic applies for us. Yes, a good degree of persistence. You know what?
Hmm.
If we're leaders, we've got a good degree of persistence. We've
Yeah.
it's established. We're not needing to try to be even more persistent. We're probably there. What is a blind spot sometimes is to make sure we keep on the range of options,
Hmm.
the dropping this thing, the letting go, the difficult decision that sometimes we have to make in while consulting with our mentors, with others around us, our coach, our psychologist,
Yeah.
whoever, to really make sure we've done the exploration we need to do. But sometimes, yes, it's about letting go.
That's such a great point. I think that's a point that isn't said enough. Is sometimes you need to let go, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the reality is sometimes you are forced to let go. You are forced into failure, right? Because not everyone can succeed. But sometimes you have to make the choice to let go, and that's actually a healthy thing in terms of resilience. And this is one of the things that I think I really appreciate about the work that you're doing, MH, is that as a psychologist, you understand the psychological nature of resilience. Resilience is really something that's psychological nature that is developed over time, and that is something that you have the expertise based upon your research and your experience to understand. Help us understand what in your experience. What are some of the things that people really misunderstand or don't appreciate about resilience?
Um, Especially leaders
Hmm.
think that how complicated can this be? This is what they tell me. They say, seriously, like, come on. Like, I've always done this. Like, what do you mean? Like, I need to
Hmm.
now like work on it. And and sometimes the mistake is to almost it's almost like they see this as a dichotomy. So either they are an extremely effective, hardworking, efficient, fabulous leader here,
Hmm.
or they are this massively spending their time on self care, self exploration, thinking
Hmm.
about their feeling all day person. And so therefore, of course, they don't associate with that second option. So they
Yeah.
stay with the first option. And that's a mistake because so many times in life, things are not a dichotomy, not, one or the other.
Yeah.
And definitely here, you're going to stay all these things, highly resourceful, high performing, all these things.
Hmm.
And we're going to add, think of it as a 2% shift here to that will make it maybe an 80% difference
Hmm.
because you're incorporating elements that focus on your resilience in, again, a very realistic, customized way. So the mistake is to think of it as a dichotomy, and therefore no.
Yeah, I appreciate that example. Sometimes we can get very rigid in our thinking. Do you have any examples of how you've used this plan and how leaders have actually been able to adopt it and adapt their leadership and their ability to be resilient?
Yes. Yes. I mean, the steps I propose in the book, I've extracted those that seem to be having the most effect in being able to get us to the plan.
Hmm.
And at a high level, we're extracting your values, we're extracting your current sources of supply and demand, we're
Hmm.
extracting elements of your context to really have good visibility and then creating a plan. So I'll give you an example of someone who was a leader. Well, the person's still a leader, but I worked with this person in the first part of this year. Leader who worked from home now. That's how
Hmm.
things were. And very efficient. Everything was going decently fine, although they were seeing that they were trending down in terms of their levels of energy. Still love what they do, wanting to keep doing everything, but struggling to keep the engagement, the even passion that they had for their work. As we looked at this particular individual's values, some of their values included personal relationships. They had didn't have a family where they lived there, but they had good friends and they liked connecting with them. So they valued relationships. There were other values there as well. Their current sources of supply and demand were through the roof with with demand, sorry, and very little supply. Their
Hmm.
overall context is they had just moved to a new area. They had made some friends there, but many of their friends were away. So, okay, as we explored the overall situation, then they created their plan. And one of the so in the plan, we basically literally do it the same way we would do in business, where we
Hmm.
create strategic pillars, so high level directions with actions for each. For this particular individual, this led to having a pillar called boundaries because they realized that given their overall context, they had slipped into working well beyond a healthy number of hours. In part, the demands were there, but in part, they didn't put limits because they thought, well, there's nothing else I need to do right now. I'm fine with doing it. I'm thrilled to do it. And they kept going. One of their pillars was boundaries. And then some of their actions included scheduling time with friends here, friends in other places, maintaining these commitments, even meeting new people here to make sure that they would connect in person with different individuals. So, and there were many other directions and plans. But for this individual, this was doable. This made sense. But
Hmm.
because now it had been a bit of, it had received some perspective and reflection on what they needed now in their context, this became part of their plan. And that's what we do. The plan becomes something that literally, once you have it, you could implement it tomorrow. It is not complicated. That's a very consistent message I get. People say, I was not doing any of this because I thought a bit like the dichotomy we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It felt initially like it would lead to many changes they did not want. And no, it just leads to small changes we can implement.
I really appreciate the concrete nature of the plan. You come up with a very specific concrete plan that's actionable and
Yep.
really focused towards business leaders. So I think that's something that's really going to resonate with people, and people are going to find really very helpful, right? Because we don't have a lot of options out there like that. Um, Marie, this has been such a pleasure talking to you. How do people reach out to you if they want to continue the conversation, or get your services or get you for a speaking engagement, things like that?
Yeah, they can go to theresilienceplan.com. The book gets to everything I do, including the book and everything else. So theresilienceplan.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Always love to hear how people are doing. And if they listen to this episode, what they valued specifically about it. I know I valued our conversation. So
Yeah.
always that. Yeah.
Excellent. And then before I let you go, I always like to take advantage of the experts that we have on the show, like yourself, and ask, what's a tip that you have for business leaders and organizations now in this time that we're in right now?
Yes. I would say get something or someone in your corner. So, if you already have someone in your corner, like a coach, a mentor, someone you're working with, make
Hmm.
sure you stay connected with them. If you don't have that, don't need that right now, that's fine. but find something that will allow you to self reflect a little bit, check in with yourself, be self aware. This is something we've heard in conversations about emotional intelligence. For example,
Yeah.
it comes out in many doors when we're looking at how we can psychologically bring our even better self in our
Yeah.
work and personal lives. So I'm going to go with whatever you need to have something or someone in your corner, whether
Yeah.
it's journaling, talking to someone, going for a run with no music so you can think and let your brain process. You need that space because otherwise you're going all day, every minute.
Yeah, that reminds me of something else that I heard recently about how in this day and age when we're all bombarded by information 24/7 and we have social media and especially as leaders, you think sometimes if I'm not working, if I'm not answering questions, if I'm not making decisions, I'm not responding to emails, I'm not working. You have to make time to just sit and let your mind settle.
Yeah.
I think that's really important, and the importance of having a coach or someone that you can have that reflective time with, that you can get different opinions for, is really very important, especially as the work that we do is engaging in helping people with understanding their behavior and other people's behavior. I think the work that we do, we're well suited for this kind of thing. So I always advocate for get a coach. What professional athlete doesn't have a coach? They have coaches because they want to do better. So if you want to do better, get someone to help you.
Mhm.
Marie, thank you so much for MH. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to reading the full book here.
Thank you, Ernest. It was an absolute pleasure to speak with you and explore all these areas.
Excellent. Thank you for coming on the show. And to our listeners, thanks for listening. We hope you'll join us again next time.